So, finally, and for what he must have thought the best of reasons, he ended it with a shotgun. "So are you going to move into the mountains and shoot yourself?" A nagging voice in the back of his head kept squeaking. But he chased it away, telling himself that being the prestige of a prestige was simply no fun. And then, all of a sudden, there it was. Two simple wooden poles with metallic birds on top of them and with a metal gate between them. The gate was actually wide open, but on the poles left and right there were numerous signs that told you to keep out. Dee sank down on a rock at the other side of the road and stared at the little log cabin behind the gate. Was this really it? Could he trust the map on his touchscreen? The place seemed familiar from countless pictures and films, but he just couldn't be sure. He kept hearing the cries of birds from the other side of the fence, but he could not see them in the bushes before him. Their cries got louder and louder, and finally Dee decided to walk back down to his car before they would attack him. When he passed the creek, he noticed that there was still a rushing river. It had not swallowed his car yet, though, and when Dee sat down in the driver's seat, his only concern was whether the engine would start. It did. But the little light behind the wheel, telling him to check engine, was still shining bright, and it looked like it would be his constant companion for the rest of his journey. Dee decided to drive down to Aspen, the expensive, fat city which inhabitants threatened the peaceful existence of this town, according to Thompson, who had demonized them as great hats time and time again. But when Dee reached the airport at the city limit, numerous expensive parking lots appeared to his right, which fees he could not afford, and on which he would probably not be able to spend the night anyways. But when he entered the city, he realized that the lots he had just passed were the only places where people who were not residents or guests of one of the many fancy hotels or ski resorts could leave their car. After curving round through the pretty little streets for a while, Dee decided to continue his journey east and stop somewhere alongside the road as soon as the expensive ski slopes and campsites would be behind him. He told his touchscreen to navigate him to Denver and began to drive down a narrow, winding road through beautiful forests. He kept passing signs that outlawed overnight parking, and every once in a while a police car appeared in his rearview mirror. So even though he was still worn out and tired from the past night, he kept going further, hoping that the road would turn into an interstate or a highway soon. But instead it just led him further and further into the Rocky Mountains. And then, from one second to the next, the sky turned dark and it began to hail heavily. Within seconds, Dee was surrounded by a thick white haze, and while his windshield wipers only smeared the icy mass across the window on the outside, it began to fog up on the inside. Apparently, he was now all alone on the road. The only thing he could see when he wiped the insides of his windows were snow-covered rocks to his left and a gaping abyss to his right. He considered turning around, but when he looked at his screen, it looked like he had already mastered half of his route through the mountains. "No turning back!" Dee yelled out into the white void before him and stepped on the gas. He kept going higher and higher into the mountains, though, and soon he began to regret his decision. Finally, the narrow road began to wind downwards again, and Dee tried to push the brakes in the sharp curves without swerving into the abyss. He survived the mountains, but when he turned into the interstate and the land around him became plain again, he realized that he was still in incredibly high altitude. And although the hail and snowstorm had turned into rain, it was still terribly cold outside and would probably get even colder come nighttime. His only option was to keep on going. A strung-out high-speed run through the storm all the way to Denver. He wasn't sure if he would make it, if he wouldn't just collapse at some point, fall asleep behind the wheel and crash into a barn. But he did not have much of a choice. After his visit to the tavern last night, his wallet was empty. And although he did have credit cards, he wasn't sure if that broken piece of plastic still worked and whether there was any money left in his account to pay for a hotel. The motels he passed all had no vacancy signs above their doors anyway, and so Dee was thankful that at least his tank was still quite full. When road signs to Denver began to show up, the condition of the road deteriorated, and the van began swerving worse than ever. The check engine lights started blinking rapidly, and the needle of his speedometer made violent jumps. He wondered whether he was hydroplaning, but he was distracted from finding solutions to his problems by passing cars that sprayed his windshield full of water. And then, all of a sudden, the rain stopped, and shortly afterwards, the sun broke through the clouds. When he reached Denver, it was as if none of this mayhem he had just been through had ever happened. Dee came to a halt in a quiet side street uptown, and after checking for parking signs, he deemed the place safe and allowed himself to relax. Then he picked up his backpack and began to wander through the streets aimlessly. He did not have to walk far in order to find a store selling recreational marijuana. When he turned around the corner, he noticed a sign for the Giving Tree of Denver with a green cross in the window. If only he still had some cash left. Luckily, he discovered an ATM right beside it, and after getting some money out of the wall, he walked in. He found himself in some sort of waiting room, and when he noticed a young woman behind a glass window, he hesitantly approached her and said, "Hello." "Hi," the woman answered, and went on to ask whether he was here for recreational or medical marijuana. When he told her that it was the former, she asked him for ID. He handed her his passport, and after she had admitted it for a while, she said, "Let me see if we have someone open for you. It'll just be a few minutes, so have a seat for now." Dee did as he was told, and a few moments later, they called him up. He entered through a door beside the glass window and was welcomed by a clerk behind a counter full of glass jars with green content. "Hey, how are you? Come in. What can I help you with today? More bud or edibles?" "No, I think, smokables?" Dee replied and added, "Something that inspires, maybe? Something creative? Okay, I'm gonna grab you a couple of things and bring them over here, okay?" She turned towards the wall beside her and took a few containers from the shelves. "Okay, let's see this one first. This is our Pineapple Express." "Oh, really?" Dee asked, astonished and amused. And the clerk went on, "Yeah, it's a sativa, but it's very mellow. This is something like I smoke one all day, you know? I'm also an artist, so I get pretty creative with that." Dee, who still had not gotten quite past the name, asked with a slight ironic grin, "So as seen in the movie?" "No, not that crazy. It's pretty nice though. It's a sativa, but it's something I can smoke one all day and go to sleep if I want to. But I really like, it gives you a nice high to create. I also brought you over Tangerine Dream, Tangerine Haze, and Blue Dream, also a nice sativa, pretty similar to this one, Highwise." She handed him the lush green buds, and after Dee had smelled them, he asked, Sativa means? It's more energy, more cerebral, more on the mind, as opposed to more of a body high, so this would be nice for you." Then her smile got somewhat whimsical, and she conjured another bale of weed. "I did bring you this one. It's called Green Crack. If you really wanted to get a lot of stuff done. It's a light caviar. It's our highest THC count that we have right now, and also our best seller." Dee eyed the lump and asked, "And you sell it only in this size, or?" "Oh, so these two only come in eighths, and this comes in grams and eighths. A gram would be 25 plus taxes." "And you don't have them also pre-rolled by any chance?" Dee asked, and let his gaze wander across the shelves behind her. I don't, I'm sorry.